Bob Pollock is with us, Penn State Extension, visiting with us once every Friday. If you need to give Bob a call and ask him a question, please do. 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. That's 349-9227. Good morning.
Good morning.
We were talking and have been talking through the course of this last couple of months about the cicadas. Last Sunday went to church, and they were all over a tree at the church. Got home, said, well, I haven't seen them around here. Got 6 or 8 of them on the patio that afternoon. And then the next day there was one, and I haven't seen one since. But they're out. And
they're around.
Yeah. And people wonder, are they going to eat my plants? But as you explained, now they've had their fill.
Yes.
They ate on their way here.
They've been munching for 17 years.
They're here for another purpose.
That's right, they are. They want to move to the next generation.
Yeah,
they want to keep the ball rolling.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So these cicadas, and I noted on the abdomen of one that pointer. It looks like a bee stinger on the abdomen.
Yeah, so that's a female.
That's a female, and she's ready to lay eggs.
Yep. So when she's ready, then she'll pierce that needle-like appendage into a branch.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'll kind of lay a double row of eggs in the branch, and that's where the damage comes from her sticking her ovipositor into the branch, depositing those eggs, and so that's where the damage comes in, and on a mature tree. And that's probably
make a big difference.
Yeah, and people probably have noticed where they do have mature trees, that oftentimes is where there's a higher population.
Mm-hmm.
Resting and hanging out,
because there's more branches there for them to use.
And there were more tree roots there for them to feed on over these years, and so they come out in those areas where you might find less in open areas.
Yeah,
but along the woods, and boy, they'll just cling to anything when they come up out of the ground, whether it's weeds, whatever's there. That's where they'll shed that exoskeleton or that skin, that outer skin, and then kind of molt into that adult with the wings and the interesting looking eyes, beady eyes.
Yeah, the alien looking thing.
And they cling. So I did have a call about, they said they were all over their hosta. They were just thick on their hosta, as well as a number of other plants, but it looked like the hosta were wilting down. And that's not from them feeding on those plants, but probably just because their feet grip, their legs grip to whatever surface they're on. It may be enough of a grip that it kind of makes little slits in the leaf surface.
Oh, yeah.
And so then that's causing those leaves to desiccate a little bit and maybe wilt a little bit.
Yeah. Well, hosta is one of those ones you can't really kill.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah, hosta's pretty tough.
You can dig it up, turn it over, bury it, and it'll come back up again.
Wanted to ask you about this. Family Nature Palooza is happening tomorrow at Blue Spruce Park. And one of the items on their card is the Penn State Master Gardeners will have a program all about the spotted lanternfly threat.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So that I'm not really involved in that. But yes,
But you know about the threat.
They'll be talking all about that and be able to show you all the life stages and what they look like and what the potential threat is, where it is now, and the things you can be doing to help prevent it. Because even though it's not here, we're trying to prevent it from coming here.
Yeah.
So just in our travels, that becomes if we're traveling into the area that's quarantined and where they've been positively identified, and going in there just to visit or as part of a trip going through, we could potentially pick up the larva or the adults, the nymphs, and the nymphs are going to be small. They can be, when they're really small, they'll be black with these little dots. Then they'll eventually molt, get a little bigger, so they'll kind of look the same, but they just kind of increase in size, and then eventually they'll become the adult moth.
Yeah.
So those nymphs look a lot different than the moth because they don't have wings, they crawl around. So that's where they can get attached to things. So they can crawl on your vehicle, crawl on you, a suitcase, any items they could come in contact with, hang on there, and then go for a ride when you do. And so that's one major way that this pest can get moved around.
Yeah, and
they're not strong flyers either, which is good. But still, we can help them out and move them around, and that's not what we want to do.
Yeah. And you wonder because there's the truck traffic alone.
Yeah, trucks and trains,
passenger vehicles, everything that comes into and out of an area. Yeah, you almost feel like I'm doomed, but you can't go about that.
No, you can't.
I don't know because sometimes you're able to do this. You have the information at hand. How many rain days we have had in the last month or the last 2 months? All of them, basically all of them.
I don't know how many rain days, but at the moment, now this would have excluded yesterday.
It rained.
But through the 29th, we are now 5 inches above normal on rainfall, 22.5 inches.
Yeah.
And that's pretty similar to what the rest of southwest Pennsylvania is. We're in the same kind of color range that they are.
That color is dark gray, by the way, the color of our skies.
Yeah, so almost all the southwest counties, Beaver, Washington, Greene, Fayette, Allegheny, Westmoreland, those counties are all 6 inches or more above normal. Armstrong County is only 4.6 above normal.
Yeah, well then there you go.
They're lagging behind us here.
It's a drought.
And then if you go farther north, those northern tier counties, as we go across the state, they are above normal, but anywhere from 1.8 to 3.5 inches or so above normal. Not quite as much rain up north.
We got reports this week about hail damage to cars. Have you heard anything about crops?
There has been hail damage in various parts of the state. Yes, both on tree fruits like apples, as well as other crops.
Yeah.
And that's been really spotty, but it's been all over the state.
You saw the size of some of that hail. My goodness.
Yeah, pretty scary. So damaging to all kinds of things, as well as heavy rains. I know there were some heavier rains farther west that did a lot of crop damage to young plantings. Some of that will have to be replanted.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. A lot of home gardeners, of course, they've got their gardens in now. They want them in by Memorial Day, so they got them in, but it hasn't stopped raining since. How much is too much rain that will demand that they have to replant?
And of course, the plant's going to tell us that. It's going to start wilting maybe if it has too much water or it sits in water. And so what happens when plants sit in water too long, all the pores, the spaces between all the soil particles where there needs to be some air,
they drown.
Yeah. Yep, so the water replaces the oxygen, and so they essentially don't have any oxygen, and so they just die.
Yeah.
And so that can take a little bit of time for you to see a response in the top of the plant. But the wetter it is and the longer it's wet, and especially on smaller plants, they're less able to adapt to that than more established plants with a bigger root system.
Now, that's a plant that is already sprouted and is supposedly growing. What about the seeds that are below the ground?
Yeah, and seeds, they may never come up. If it's too wet, they'll rot. And so some seeds come that they are coated, some are uncoated. So you have seeds, and maybe you've saved seeds. And so those would be uncoated, untreated seeds. So a lot of times they'll put a fungicide coating on that seed just to help it in case it's too moist to fight off some of the soil-borne diseases until that seed can germinate. And other seeds are untreated, so they're a little more susceptible to those various conditions, especially too wet.
Yeah.
It's one thing if it's too dry, the seed can just sit there. Nothing's going to happen to it unless an insect comes and chews on it, or something else comes, a bird or something comes and eats it, but it can be pretty stable in that location for a long time. But when it's wet, not the case.
It breaks down.
So it'll break down, and they may rot. So if it doesn't come up in a timely manner, because the soils are warmer now, and with the moisture in the soil, seeds should germinate fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. So if within a week or two you don't see anything happening, dig up. Just go in there where you had your row, or where you think you seeded them.
Dig up a couple of inches worth of soil and see what's under there.
And the smaller the seed is, the more challenging that is to find it.
Mm-hmm. My green beans ought to be pretty easy to tell, though. Huh?
Green beans and peas and things like that are a larger seed.
Yeah.
And squash and pumpkins and things like that are a little easier to find.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a way you can check it without digging everything up and replanting unless you have to.
And I know on lawns, as we continue to talk about the effect that rain is having, you might get a sunny day like it's going to be sunny this afternoon, and everybody's going to have to rush out to mow. But when they do that, they're running over spongy ground, and it's probably going to do some damage too.
Yes.
But what are you going to do? You got to mow.
Yeah, you got to mow. So just try to time that the best you can. Stay off it as much as possible. Get the job done and move on. And but it's probably better to mow than to not mow.
Yeah.
And let it become a hay field, because then you have other challenges.
Yeah.
It just it stays wet longer, more likely to have disease issues the longer it goes, and especially when the grass blades can lay over and mat on each other, then that tends to help promote disease problems and dieback.
When grass reaches a particularly high level, and it sort of gets the seed head on it, is that a good thing?
Well, that's okay.
It can reseed that way.
Well, and most of our lawn grasses don't have to grow very high or tall in order to set seed or have those seed heads on there. So that's common to see that even when you're mowing regularly and timely, you still can get seed heads coming up there. And that's okay, because those will mature and maybe help reseed and fill in little spots. And so it's not a problem for that to happen.
There you go. We've been having all kinds of conversation today about the rain and what it does to our yards and our gardens and our trees and everything else. Thank you, sir.
You are welcome.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160, 101.1 FM.